Okay, before we close out the show, I want to kind of go over some fantasy impact. I'm going to talk about a couple players from quarterback all the way to the tight end positions. Maybe there's some guys you can claim off your waivers to see if you can get that slight edge going into week 5 of the NFL season. So let's start with quarterbacks. There's some guys that caught my attention that I think if you're in a pinch, right? Obviously, some teams are going to be going on buys here this week and moving forward, some other teams as well. So I'm going to start with Andy Dalton. I think he's a solid pick. The last 2 weeks he's averaged about 15 points a game at least. So the last 2 games, so since taking over for Bryce Young. So I think if you're in a pinch, you need a quarterback that can maybe bridge the gap while your quarterback is on a bye week. For sure, Andy Dalton would be a pickup, especially because he's thrown to guys like Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette, who have been shown, who've been proven to be really dynamic players. So I really like Andy Dalton. Joe Flacco, if he does get the start this weekend, I really like their matchup too. So look, Joe Flacco will distribute the football to all kinds of guys, right? He's not going to just look at one receiver. Whereas I think Anthony Richardson is more dependent on the big play, big throws down the field. Joe Flacco will distribute the ball to Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Ogletree, their tight end. So you saw what he can do. He's a veteran quarterback. So if you can get him and maybe stash him a little bit, especially if Anthony Richardson isn't a go, I think he's definitely a viable option for you at quarterback if you need to plug him in this particular week. So, all right, let's look at some running backs. Bucky Irving, he's stealing a lot of touches right now. From the starting running back there in Tampa Bay and White, I believe his name is White. So Bucky, he's definitely a guy worth considering picking up if he's available, or maybe if you need to make a trade for somebody, right? He's a guy right there. So he's been getting about like 12.5 points the last couple of weeks, at least the last 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, or this past week, he got 12.5 points against the Eagles, So definitely he's definitely a solid pickup, I will say. Rico Dowdle from the Dallas Cowboys. Looks like he's kind of emerging as the running back 1 for the Dallas Cowboys. So I will say he's definitely another guy. If you need an RB2 in your fantasy football league, definitely a guy worth looking at. Now, I know Dalvin Cook is supposed to be gearing up to start. I'm not sure if he's going to be involved in this game at all, or maybe the following week, but Rico Dowdle, definitely a guy that you want to look at. Also, another guy, Tyler Algier. Now, you probably think, well, he plays for the Falcons and they got Bijan Robinson, but for whatever reason, he picked up a lot more touches this past weekend against the Saints. So if for whatever reason Bijan Robinson goes down, Tyler Algier immediately is a running back 1, a guy that has potential of a true running back 1 in any other offense in the National Football League. So he's another guy you want to plug in as a flex or as like an RB2. Definitely worth it right there. And then Kareem Hunt, who had a pretty solid game with the Kansas City Chiefs coming back. Now he's still learning the offense. I will say this though. Samaje Perine did steal some goal line touches from him, but I think overall Kareem Hunt is going to be a guy that they're going to rely heavily on, just because let's just face it. I mean, he may know most of the system, right? I mean, he was there when Andy Reid was there, so I think there's a good chance that he's going to be the premier back until Isaiah Pacheco comes back and proves that he's a healthy running back 1 for that particular team. So there you have it. There, Tank Bigsby now. This is one is interesting. If you grab him, I would say maybe not try to play him immediately. He did have a pretty good output this past weekend against the Houston Texans. I don't know what was going on, but he did steal a ton of series from Travis Etienne. I think Etienne is still the guy there, but there's something underlining there. So it might be one of those things where you grab him, you stash him away, see what happens. Maybe Etienne falls out of favor with the coaching staff there in Jacksonville, and then you can plug in Tank Bigsby there as well. See there. So that's kind of like a steal there. Now let's talk about some wide receivers. Mike Williams of the Jets, if they can figure it out, he's definitely a red zone threat for sure. If they can get down there, big, tall frame, you can throw the ball up to and go get it. So I really like that. He's worth adding. Again, if you need a flex, possibly a wide receiver too, he's a guy that I think can fill that role there. Another guy who I like is Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants, right across the locker room there. If Malik Neighbors isn't a go, I think Wan'Dale Robinson will be a go-to guy for Daniel Jones. So keep an eye out on that for him there, especially as a wide receiver 1. If you're in that desperate need and you need a guy, he might be a guy, but definitely a 1-2 or even a flex, depending on how strong your team is. And then Xavier Legette, I talked about this earlier with Andy Dalton. the more and more Andy Dalton plays and gets more comfortable within this offense of Dave Canales, I think Xavier Legette is going to be an explosive force in the National Football League. So expect him to keep building as long as Andy Dalton is at the helm. Now, if Bryce Young comes back for whatever reason, we all know what happens there. So I would leave him out. But for sure, if Andy Dalton's there, be on the lookout for his productivity to even increase even more. So maybe take over for Deontay Johnson as number 1 wide receiver in Carolina. As far as tight ends are concerned, a little sneaky guy in Tucker Kraft for the Green Bay Packers. He became a real favorite of Jordan Love, especially this past week against the Minnesota Vikings. 6 receptions, and he racked up 17.3 fantasy points against the Vikings. So that looks pretty good. And I think it's only going to be favorable for him, especially guys like Christian Watson going down for the Green Bay Packers. So that's going to open up some more targets possibly to their tight end. So a little bit on the lookout for him. Another tight end for Tyler Conklin for the New York Jets. 8 targets this past weekend against the Denver Broncos. So listen, as long as he's getting targets, at some point the production is going to follow. So keep them in mind there. Again, these are guys that I'm not saying these guys are going to carry you through to a fantasy championship, but they might be bridgers. They might be guys that can help you get through a week by maybe your number 1 guy is there, or maybe they're a guy that you can add to your roster to get you over the edge. So he's one of those guys. And finally, Cade Otton from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Second week double-digit points, right? So, double-digit points. So looking like maybe another target for Baker Mayfield there. So guys that you want to look at, again, another good option if you have a guy that's out on a bye. So there you have it. So those are my fantasy impact players. Do what you like with them. Just go look, man. Do the research yourself. But I did some of the research, so there it is. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I know a little bit of something about something, right? I don't even that's to say, but it is what it is. But anyway.